During Avengers Infinity War, we saw many of our favorite heroes trying desperately to take down Thanos. As we all know, they weren't successful, and it seems their task is now harder than ever. But it is possible to defeat Thanos, and we'll point out some of his most obvious weaknesses. Could Thanos' greatest possible weakness ultimately be himself? Let's find out. Before we start planning to take down Thanos, subscribe to CBR and ring that bell to join our notification squad so you never miss our MCU-related videos. Without further ado, let's get started. Love. The Marvel Cinematic Universe does many things very well, but it's missing one major part of Thanos' motivation. Besides money and power, love is one of the greatest motivators in the galaxy, and it's exactly what drives Thanos in the comic books. He isn't trying to get rid of half-all life because he thinks it's a nice thing to do. He's trying to impress a chick, and by a chick, of course, we mean Lady Death. She's the personification of death. Even if you ignore that, she and Thanos are pretty much complete opposites. He's often loud and boastful while she's more quiet and reserved. Avengers Infinity War co-director Anthony Russo claims that Death is a complex character whose existence would have had ramifications for the entire MCU. After all, Infinity War had tons going on, and it wasn't exactly the right time to introduce a complicated character like Death. But in the comics, there's absolutely nothing Thanos won't do in order to woo her, and of course, nothing impresses a lady more than mass genocide. Thanos is desperate for her affection, which can be a huge weakness, but getting what he wanted from Death may have caused an even worse situation for the Mad Titan. Ambition. In the comic books, Thanos learned to be careful for what he wishes for. After putting together the Infinity Gauntlet and wiping out half of all life, he finally got some sweet affection from Death. But clearly these two didn't follow proper precautions when it came to their unorthodox courtship. When their energies merged, they end up creating the Rot. This is pretty much what you might have guessed would emerge from the union of a spooky skeleton and someone who looks like Thanos. Rot can destroy everything it touches, and even Death isn't able to control it. Thanos had so much ambition and accomplished so many things over the course of this story arc. The thing is, his ambition came back to haunt him in the form of Rot, who eventually devoured Vision, Mantis, and Thanos himself. Eventually, Thanos was forced to work together with Death in order to destroy Rot once and for all. Thanos had no idea what sort of horrible thing his ambition could cause until it was almost too late. Adam Warlock. There are so many awesome comic book characters we're impatiently waiting to see on the big screen. Adam Warlock is definitely one of them, and he plays a big part of Thanos' story in the comic books. Many fans are guessing he'll eventually show up in either Avengers 4 or in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. If you haven't caught up on the comics, you may be wondering who Adam Warlock is. His origin is complicated, but suffice to say he's dedicated to protecting the universe, which means taking down Thanos, and luckily, he definitely has enough power to pull off such an incredible feat. Not only is he immensely powerful, but he has a deep understanding of what makes Thanos tick. Adam Warlock really knows his enemy, making him the perfect foil. In fact, when Thanos is finally stripped of the Infinity Gauntlet, it's Adam Warlock who decides he must never be in possession of it again. He forms the Infinity Watch. And no, that's not the latest Infinity accessory on the market. It's a group dedicated to making sure that the stones are never again joined together in such a fashion. Many fans wonder if Adam Warlock will finally be introduced into the MCU because at this point, it looks as if he's the only one who can take down Thanos. Children. It's no secret that Thanos had a strained relationship with his children, to say the least. Gamora is often referred to as his adopted daughter, but during Avengers Infinity War, we learned Thanos had a different definition of adopt than we do. After he more or less kidnapped Gamora and destroyed her family, he forced her to endure a cruel training regimen that both Gamora and her sister Nebula have complained about. Not only did Thanos make sure his children would be as strong as possible, but he also made sure they'd absolutely despise him. Have you ever noticed Gamora can't go more than 5 minutes without talking about how much she hates her dad? And we can't imagine her disposition towards him has improved since he tossed her off a cliff during Infinity War. In the comics, we're introduced to Thanos' son, Thane. Unlike Gamora and Nebula, Thane is the biological child of Thanos, and, like his siblings, Thane wants nothing more than to take out his old man. In the comic books, Thane manages to defeat Thanos by trapping him in an amber construct where he would remain neither fully living nor dead. Himself. What is a great villain without a hero to fight against? In Thor Ragnarok, we learn that if Thor isn't around to fight with, Loki has nothing to do but take in an afternoon of theater. Thanos has no shortage of enemies who are desperate to take him down. As we've seen over and over again, Thanos is seen as such an evil character that you might think all of this doesn't bother him. But at the end of the day, Thanos is a compelling character because his greatest weakness is ultimately himself. We've seen glimpses of Thanos' humanity before, such as when he envisioned himself talking to little Gamora at the end of Infinity War. We know he's willing to sacrifice anything and everything to get what he wants, but that doesn't mean he's free of consequence. He believes the ends justify the means, and this does come back to bite him more than often than not. During Thanos Wins, we even see him literally facing off against another version of himself. His ego is so massive that it makes Star-Lord look humble. But in so many cases, his hubris is his ultimate downfall, and there's nowhere in the universe he can go in order to escape it. Drax. There's no denying that Drax the Destroyer is a fan favorite in the MCU, but more often than not, he's just getting laughs because of his rather straightforward way of speaking. After all, they don't call this guy Drax the Destroyer for nothing, and he's too powerful of an enemy to underestimate. We know he has pretty powerful beef with Thanos, what with him ordering Ronin to destroy his family and all. During Avengers Infinity War, we saw Drax lunge at Thanos and be unsurprisingly rebuffed. Although that burst of pure rage and hatred caused Drax to act rashly, it's possible that he could be more of a match for Thanos. In the comics, Drax begins life as a human named Arthur Douglas. He and his family are obliterated by Thanos, and Arthur ends up getting a chance for revenge. He's brought back to life by Thanos' father, Mentor, aka Alars, and the god Kronos. They stick his spirit in a new body and hope that he can use his hatred for Thanos to ultimately destroy him. In the comics, Drax teams up with the Avengers and is able to finally take his revenge on Thanos. Eventually, he rips Thanos' heart out, which is pretty poetic if you think about it. If Drax manages to focus his rage instead of being blinded by it, he could be a much greater enemy than Thanos seems to think. Infinity Gauntlet. There's no denying that the completed Infinity Gauntlet is the greatest weapon around. But Thanos has pretty much put all of his effort into acquiring it instead of diversifying. This means that if this tool is taken away from him, he's going to be more vulnerable than ever to his legions of enraged enemies. Of course, disarming him is easier said than done, but it's happened before in the comic books and it might happen again in the movies based on the ending of Avengers Infinity War. By the time the movie wrapped up, the Gauntlet was looking a little bit ragged to say the least. As we've learned in previous movies, holding onto the Infinity Stones without some sort of tool is a pretty terrible idea. Even Peter Quill could only hold it for a few seconds despite his powerful lineage and the help of his fellow Guardians of the Galaxy. If Thanos' major weapon is out of commission, this means someone else could strike. We saw Thor lose his iconic hammer, Mjolnir, and forge a new one with some help of his friends. With the Infinity Gauntlet out of Thanos' hands, this could be the perfect time for a mighty strike from Stormbreaker, and we can't think of a better time for Thor to break in his brand new weapon. God Emperor Doom. Some fans believe there's no way of any of the current MCU characters could possibly take down Thanos at this point, so we took a look at the comic books to see who has a fighting chance of standing against the Mad Titan. If you're a Marvel fan, then you've probably heard about the villain Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom was a young man with a tragic backstory who became interested in the worlds of both science and magic. Like all too many mad scientists, he ended up injuring himself during an experiment, ultimately using his powers for evil. Eventually, Dr. Doom becomes powerful beyond all belief and becomes known as God Emperor Doom. He became such a powerful enemy that even the mighty Thanos chose not to go after him unopposed, and as we know, Thanos isn't exactly known for playing well with others. He took up with Star-Lord, Black Panther, and other heroes in an effort to overthrow God Emperor Doom. They led a massive rebellion against him, with mixed results. On the one hand, they did manage to cause the downfall of Doom, but on the other hand, Thanos ended up getting completely obliterated. Not only did Doom destroy Thanos, but he actually made it look pretty easy. This is definitely one character to watch out for if he ever makes it into the MCU. Deadpool. Deadpool? Although audiences love him, Deadpool manages to rub a lot of characters the wrong way. Although they haven't crossed paths on the big screen, Thanos and Deadpool are familiar with one another in the comic books. It turns out they have more in common than you might think, including similar tastes in women. That's right, in the comic books, Deadpool has a thing for death, which makes sense in a weird way. In the first Deadpool movie, we saw Wade Wilson hovering between life and death fairly often. In the comics, this gave him plenty of time to become acquainted with Lady Death, and surprisingly, she returned his feelings. But the downside of falling for death is that to be together, you have to actually die. Thanos can stand the thought of anyone else being with his lady love, so he cursed Deadpool with eternal life. So just to recap, Thanos made one of his many enemies immortal. If that sounds like a bad move, that's because it is. We've seen Deadpool do some pretty insane things for love in the past, and we know he loves death. He's also generally in favor of saving the day, while Thanos loves destroying things. Thanos has added Deadpool to the ranks of powerful enemies he created, which may someday mean his downfall. Cancer. In addition to being enamored with death, Thanos and Deadpool have something else in common. They both had to struggle with a serious health condition. In the comic books, Thanos is suffering from some sort of cancer, which even he can't defeat. It seems strange to think of someone inhuman having such an illness, and Thanos isn't sure how to deal with it. He's no healer to say the least, so he finds a whole planet of them, who he hopes can assist him, and when they inevitably fail at their task, Thanos destroys them all. In the comics, this disease weakens Thanos considerably, making him desperate to find a cure. Obviously, this would be the perfect time for him to be taken down as he grows increasingly weak and unstable. It could be that the greatest weapons and warriors in the universe are no match for Thanos until his body starts to fail him. Even his own powerful father, Alars, is unwilling and unable to find a cure for him. In the comics, word gets around that Thanos is feeling under the weather, and people start coming out of the woodwork in order to take him down. In the MCU, Thanos is already a massive target, and this could be just what his enemies need to get the better of him. After hearing about the different ways Thanos is vulnerable, what do you think is his greatest weakness? Tell us how you think he could be defeated in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more MCU content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.